Hi everyone. So I have a fun watercoloring project for you today. You don't need any stamps or die cuts to be able to complete this little painting, just some watercolors and a pencil and a black pen to outline everything, and off we go. So let's go ahead and get started. So I just penciled in my design on this piece of Arches cold press paper. It's on a block. It is the 3.5 by 11-inch block, which I really, really love. It's perfect for a slimline card if you're interested in turning this design into a card. And it also would work really, really great if you frame it as well, if you want to hang it on the wall and give it as a gift to someone. So the way that I started drawing this is I just took a die cut. I think I used a heart die cut from Lawn Fawn, and I kind of blocked out where I wanted the heart to go. And then after that, I just traced a round object for the circle for the plate for the coffee cup. And then I traced a smaller circle for the coffee cup itself. And then I just added the E and the L on either side of those two images that I really just traced other objects for. And in areas where it looked like I didn't have enough room to fit the entire bubble letter for the L and the E, I just overlap them a little bit with the other letters. So as you see, the L overlaps with the little coffee cup a little bit. So just a real easy drawing to do here. You're just going to make the letters L and E in bubble letters, which is pretty easy, and then you can trace a heart die, or you can hand draw in a heart, and then you're just gonna trace a little circle next to the heart as well to get your coffee cup. So very simple. And then after I pen in my design, I just go ahead and I erase the pencil marks underneath it before I go ahead and paint. And now we're just going to add a little bit more detail with our black pen. I'm using a Pigma Micron. It's the PN pen. I don't know what PN stands for, but it's got like kind of a small, not a small, a smooth point to it that works really, really well on this rough arches paper. And I'm just going to add the icing for the letters and for the little heart. And I'm just making a wavy little line right along the inside edge of the objects to make the icing. And it's really just that simple, just tracing along the edges. If you use a regular micron pen here, like the 0.3 or the 0.5, you'll find that this paper will really beat up your nib. So I don't recommend it for this Arches cold press paper. It's very, very rough. So that's why I like to use this PN micron pen. It's also waterproof as well, so we'll be able to watercolor over it. You can start painting right away, but if you want, there's probably no harm in waiting about an hour before you start laying down color, just to make sure it doesn't bleed. But I didn't wait here. I just went right ahead and started coloring. So for the coffee mug, I am just going to use some sepia, a very, very light wash. And I'm just going to add that to the edges of the coffee. And then to brighten it a little, I think I took a little bit of quinacridone gold. And then this is a little bit of burnt umber as well. So any brown shades that you like will work well. I'm just making the edges dark, and then I'm leaving a light center in the center of that coffee. And again, this is just our first layer here. So I'm just going to lay down a light wash and then add a little bit of darker pigment in a wet on wet technique and just kind of let it bleed towards the middle, knowing that I will have a chance to put some more details in when we go in with our second layer of color, and possibly a third. We'll just see how it goes, I guess. And the next thing that we're going to paint is the icing on the little cart cookie here. And I'm just using some pink here. I think this is quinacridone rose mixed with a little bit of buff titanium and also a little bit of brown, I think, just to make the pink a little bit duller. So unfortunately, I don't have a good pre-mixed pink, so I always have to kind of go ahead and create pink as I go along with different colors that I have. But I find that the buff titanium, it gives it like a real nice light pinkness to it, and then the brown will also like dull the brightness of that quinacridone rose, if that's what you're using, or quinacridone pink, whichever. Any pink color that you like would work here, or any color that you would like for your frosting. And I'm getting a little bit of bleed there from the coffee cup, but that's okay. I like the way that it looks. It gives a little bit of whimsy, I think, to the overall watercolor painting. It's a nice thing sometimes, I think, when the watercolors bleed together. But if you want to make sure that none of your colors bleed, just be sure to work on sections that are separated so that the colors don't bleed together. For the L here, I'm using a turquoise. I'm just taking some cobalt turquoise here, a light wash, and I'm applying it to the L in love. You could also, if you didn't want to use a lot of different colors here, you could just use a pink and red theme like I did on one of the samples at the beginning of the video. For the E, I'm using some carbazole violet. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I think any lilac or purple that you like would work, or any color really at all. The great thing about this painting is that you can use your favorite colors, because icing on cookies can be any color. You could make this hot chocolate if you wanted and have a darker color inside the little mug, or you could make it a tea and have a lighter color. So lots of options there. You could put some little marshmallows in the mug as well. For the dish itself, we are going to make it appear as though it's white. So I'm just going to add some gray shadows in certain areas around the plate. I'm using Payne's Gray for this. Pretty light wash, and then I'm going to blend it out even more just with some clear water on my brush there. So I'm adding this color wherever I think the shadows might appear, and to define the edges of the plate as well. So I'm going to add color along the rim of the plate, along the rim of the coffee mug, because that's where it may be casting a shadow down onto the plate. Again, if you're imagining how you're seeing this, we're looking just straight down. So it would be, I guess, at the shadows as though you're looking straight down. It's not coming from the left or the right, just from above. And I'm just going to add a little bit more of that really light gray just in the areas where I want the shadows. And we will have a chance to go back and deepen up some of these shadows, but I think this looks pretty good for now. Maybe just one more little shadow on the top of the coffee mug here. You could also, if you like, you don't have to outline the image in black pen. If you want to have a no line color look, you could just go ahead and paint right over your pencil lines if you like. Just make sure that the pencil lines are nice and light so they don't show through. I'm just taking a heat gun now to speed up the drying process so we can go ahead and start working on our cookie layer. So for the cookie layer, I'm using some yellow ochre here and just a light wash, and it's a real thin strip of color that we're going to add to each of the little cookies. So we're going to add it to the heart that's standing in as the V in love, and then the E and the L. And I'm just adding a really light wash there. And we'll add a little bit of shadows and a little bit with a little darker brown shade. But for now, we're just going to add the cookie crumb itself. So a nice beige color. Maybe it's a sugar cookie, I guess. And I'm just going around those edges, so in between the frosting to the edges of the cookie. In some areas where my icing bled outside, I'll just go right over it with our cookie color. It's okay. And now we can go ahead and add a little bit of shadow to our cookie. So I'm just taking a little bit of sepia on a very thin brush, and I'm just applying it along the edges of the cookie. Two different ways you can do the shading here. You can either apply the shading like right underneath the frosting or along the edges of the cookie. I think I started applying it to the edges, and then I decided it looked a little bit better if I put that shadow right underneath the frosting. So that's what I'm doing there. But I think either way will look fine. Again, this is a project just to experiment and just have fun with, because in the end, it's such a pretty little painting and there's so much to look at, and it has a little bit of a cartoony feel to it that you're not going to notice if a shadow isn't exactly realistic. What's going to make the painting interesting to look at is just the different variations of color that you get on the different little items in the painting. So now we're going to add some shadow to the cookie on the heart. And for this one, I'm applying that shadow right along the black edge, I guess. And I'll just keep working there. Now I'm applying it on like closer to the inside there, like to the edges of the frosting. If you enjoy these watercolor tutorials where we're not working with any products and we're just creating our own simple designs by using little objects that we already have around the house, and just having fun with coloring, good news, I have some more tutorials coming up. I actually filmed a bunch of tutorials in the past couple of weeks, but I just haven't gotten around to doing the voiceover. So I am gonna try to get a bunch done, so there should be some fun watercolor painting tutorials to look forward to, all with this kind of coffee and love theme as well. So there were things that I had done in advance of Valentine's Day. So now we're just going to finish up with our shading on our last little cookie here. So I'm just taking my sepia and just adding a thin little strip right underneath that frosting. And again, the point is just to get some different tones going on, just so it looks a little interesting. And now we can add some more detail to our coffee cup. So I'm taking a thicker, more pigmented watercolor. So this is that burnt umber. And I'm just going to apply like a thick coat of paint and then blend it out towards the center with a just a brush that has some clear water on it. And then along those very edges, I think I went back in with a little bit of sepia. So we've got about 3 different brown shades going on in our coffee mug, and I think that they all blend together to make a real realistic and yummy cup of coffee. For our little hearts here, I am taking, this is my favorite red to do shadowing on, either red or pink. This is Perylene Maroon, and I'm using that as my second coat for our hearts, and then also to add some shading to the heart cookie icing. And I'm just applying the color around the edges, and then I'll just blend it inwards with some clear water, trying to leave just a little bit of that first layer showing through. The more of the first layer that shows through, the more depth that the image will have. It'll just it'll look real beautiful, like there's a little bit of light shining on those little hearts. So that is one tip. Whenever you're watercoloring, you always want to leave like little bits of your first layer just showing through, because it's gonna be able to create like real pretty light effects in your work. And now for the shading on the L, I thought that I would try to do some shading concentrated on the lower part of the L and then having it blend out into almost nothing towards the top, just for a fun little unexpected look here. So again, just focusing the color on the second layer color on the bottom, and then just letting it blend out into just nothingness of the first layer towards the top of the L. And then we can move on to the E, and I'm going to apply a second coat of that Carbazole Violet just along the edges. And then I will wash off my brush, and just with a little bit of clear water, I'll blend that out. And I'll just keep blending here and cleaning off my brush in between, just to make sure that the blend is nice and it's not picking up too much color. And I'm going to do the same thing that I had done with the L, where I'm going to keep the top of the E pretty light and just have that color from the second layer really just focused on the bottom part. For the shading on the cookie, we're going to take that Perylene Maroon and just water it down just a little bit and then just blend it inwards. So we're going to have some shading along the edges of the heart, frosting, and then the center of the heart's going to be nice and light. And then I'm going to apply a little bit more shading to the coffee cup. So I'm taking a real tiny brush here. This is a size 2 pointed round. And I'm taking a little bit more of that Payne's gray, a little bit more concentrated pigment here. And I'm just going to build up the shadow underneath the coffee cup and the little handle. And then we'll go around the edges as well. And you can see the image is just really starting to pop now that that bit of contrast just really adds so much. It's a tiny touch, but it really does help to bring the little illustration alive. And then we're going to do the same thing, just going around the rim of the plate towards the top there. Just blend it just a little bit with some clear water. And I'm thinking that it's looking pretty good. And now the only thing left to do is to add some details with some white gouache. You can use a white gel pen as well if that's what you have to add your white detail. I am going to add some sprinkles to our heart cookie. And I'm just going to take my number 2 pointed round and I'm just going to draw these little clusters of sprinkles that are just kind of, they're fanning out from each other. So there'll be clusters of 2s or 3s, all like set at a little bit of a diagonal to each other, just to get like an interesting look here and to make sure that there aren't any pieces that end up falling on the heart in right angles, which would look like disruptive if you were looking at it that way. And I'm just going to keep going around and adding in my little clusters of sprinkles all around our little cookie. And we will go back and add another coat of white to these sprinkles because the gouache is going to dry lighter. And then we'll also add a shadow underneath the sprinkles as well. And you'll see how that helps the little sprinkles to really pop off the page. So now I'm just going back over and adding a second coating of gouache here. If you did this with white gel pen, you would be able to get away with just doing the one coat. It just depends on what your preference is. And again, like for the sprinkles, I chose to use gouache on a paintbrush just because it's easier, I think, on the paper. I feel that you can add small details with like a white Signo Uniball gel pen, but if you add too many, the rough paper, the rough arches cold press paper can like ruin the tip of your pen. So I try not to use it too much on my paintings. So I'm just adding a little shadow under one edge of the sprinkles, and I'm just using a little darker tone of the pink that we use to color in the cookie icing, and then that's going to create like just a nice little effect and make the sprinkles look like they're 3D and that they're like popping off the cookies a little bit. And that sprinkle got a little smushed, but that's okay. And now we'll add some little round sprinkles to the E. And for this, I just thought it would be easier given the shape to just use the Signo gel pen. So I'm just adding little dots all over the E. And I added some little brown dots on the L as well. I guess I did that before. I may not have filmed that part. And then I'm just going to add a little white accent to the hearts as well. And then I thought about adding a white accent to the coffee, but it ended up not looking that good. So I think I'm going to smear it a little bit with my finger. And then I'm just going to, if there's any areas where the color bled onto the white coffee cup, I just go over it with a white gel pen to clean that up. So that's a little trick that you can use if you accidentally paint over a white area. And that is going to do it. So that is our little love painting that you can use as a slimline card, or you can use as a little painting, or just as a little sketchbook page as well, if that's what you like. And that's all I have for you now, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you again soon with some more watercolor tutorials.